be surprised that there's more people like that than you realize. There's a bunch of them. And somebody ought to be responsible, and it ought to be the kids first. You and I. I called on the way to church this morning, I called my mother. My mother's 88. She'll be next week, August the 4th, she'll turn 89. She asked me a few years ago if I would pray for her to live to be 90. And I said, well, I'll do it, Mom. I will. And I've been praying. One of the first prayers I pray in the morning is for my mother, that God would grant her wish and her desire to live to be past 90. You know what? It's getting a little close now, and that's almost scary. But I called her up this morning and I said, well, my sister answered the phone. She lives with my sister, and my sister takes care of her. And I just want to tell you, my sister is an angel in that respect. She takes care of my mother. She cooks for her. She checks on her before she goes to work each morning. She makes sure she's got plenty of things within reach. She can move her wheelchair around and get some food, and she can get to the restroom by herself. And then she has a caretaker that comes in 3 or 4 times a week and cleans and sees after her. She's got her own apartment in the house, and so my sister answered the phone, and I like to pick at my sister. She's a younger sister, and she just appreciates me picking on her. She won't tell you that. She'll fuss and argue and act like she just despises it when I pick on her, but she likes it. So I called her up this morning, and she answered the phone rather hastily. I said, boy, it sounds like you're in a big hurry answering the phone that way. She said, well, I'm trying to do this for Mom and trying to get ready to go to church. And I said, well, I was calling Mom to talk to her anyway. She said, oh, well, I might have known. And I said, yeah. I said, I'm preaching this morning about how to treat your parents, and I thought I'd better call her up and say something nice so I wouldn't be a hypocrite while I'm preaching. And she said, well, you are a hypocrite. She said, I'm thinking about coming to church down there tonight and telling your people just how you are, calling up, trying to justify yourself before you preach. And she's really railing on me, And so I talked to my mom, and you know what I told her? I told my mom, I said, I just want to tell you, because I was thinking about this morning. When old people that have taken care of us, when they get old, they need somebody to take care of them like they took care of us when we were babies. And I called Mom up and I said, I just want you to know, not only do I love you, but I really do appreciate you taking care of me, changing my diapers when I was little, cleaning up my slobbers, feeding me, watching out for me, doing my laundry, trying to keep me out of trouble. I said, I just want you to know I love you and I appreciate everything you've ever done for me. You know what? I think that made her day. Now, the truth is, a lot of people ignore their parents when they get elderly because they drool or because they need somebody to clean them up and wipe their bottom. Can I just remind you that when you were little, they cleaned you up and you spit up your milk on their breast and you needed your bottom wiped and you needed your diaper changed, and I say, now it's your turn. We need to take care of our elderly parents. Honor thy father and thy mother. Let me show you what was happening in the Jesus time. In Matthew chapter 15 and in verse number 3, Jesus was talking to the religionists of his age, and he gives them a rebuke. He says, but he answered and said unto them, why do ye also transgress the commandment of God by your tradition? For God commanded, here's the same verse again, honor thy father and mother, and he that curseth father or mother, let him die the death. In the Old Testament, if you were to curse your father and mother, you would have been stoned to death. Boy, there's a lot of young people better be glad that the Old Testament law is not enforced today, because we'd have a lot of dead young people today. I can't imagine some young person cursing their father or mother, but it happens. I wouldn't have cursed my father because I didn't want to reap the benefits of that cursing. He would have knocked me into last week or next week. That's the way it goes. He'd knock me into next week. He might have knocked me into last week too. And I wouldn't have cursed my mother, even though she wouldn't probably slug me in the jaw. I could see the heartbreak on her face if I'd have done it. And that would have been worse than any punch in the nose. And yet there are young people who feel like they can sass their parents and backtalk their parents and talk disrespectful to their parents and even curse them. What a shame. Well, this is what they were doing in that day. And then Jesus said this. He said they would be stoned to death if they cursed them. But ye say, whosoever shall say to his father or mother, it is a gift by whatsoever thou mightest be profited by me, and honor not his father or his mother, he shall be free. Thus ye have made the commandment of God of none effect by your tradition. Ye hypocrites, well did Isaiah prophesy of you, saying, This people draweth nigh unto me with their mouth, and honoreth me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. But in vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Now what they were talking about in that day was that young people, young adults, and their parents had gotten elderly. Sometimes some of those young adults would take money instead of helping their parents that had gotten too elderly to take care of themselves, and instead of taking some money or some possession that they had and taking care of their parents, they'd say, well, I can't use that. I promised to give this to God. I promised this as a sacrifice or an offering. And so I can't give it to you, Mom or Dad. Sorry, see ya. And by that, they were being hypocrites, trying to say that their religious service would come between them and their parents' existence. Serving God's a wonderful thing, but if we use that as an excuse to not take care of our elderly parents, we have done wrong. In 1 Timothy 5:4, listen to this. But if any widow have children or nephews, let them learn first to show piety at home and to requite their parents. That means to take care of their parents. For that is good and acceptable before God. Now notice verse 8. He says, But if any provide not for his own, and specially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. A lot of times we say, well, that's talking about the parents taking care of their children. No, that's not what it's talking about at all. It's talking about the children taking care of their parents. If he doesn't provide for his own, now true, parents ought to take care of their children. But there comes a time, and in this context, it's talking about the times when the parents have gotten old. And now the children are to take care of the parents. This is a biblical teaching. Honor thy father and thy mother. Number 3, and I'm almost done. Honor them at all times. We're supposed to honor our parents when we're young. We need to listen to them, but we need to honor them even when we're adults. Honor thy father and the mother. Let me give you just a couple of things to jot down under that. Number 1, show them respect. I don't know why it is we treat elderly people like they're stupid. Huh? Sometimes just because somebody gets in their 70s or 80s or older, younger people often, because the older person, maybe their speech is slowed down a little bit. Maybe their body's slowed down a little bit. I know that to be true. I'm slightly over 29 myself. But that doesn't mean they're stupid. And sometimes we treat old people with disrespect and push them off to the side as though they were suddenly become ignorant because they got older. No, just because their tongue doesn't respond as quickly or because they don't hear as well. I remember my grandfather, my Grandpa Brooks, he got hard of hearing in his old age, and he really, you'd have to yell to make him hear. And somehow we kids got the idea that because he couldn't hear well, he was dumb. Just because somebody gets hard of hearing, it doesn't mean their brain has deteriorated. And we don't need to treat them with disrespect. We got to where we didn't want to be around Grandpa because you had to yell to make him hear. And because we were young, we thought that was just beneath us. Now, I'm not saying we were openly disrespectful to him, but many are. And we shouldn't be. And just because somebody's gotten older doesn't mean that all of their experiences are not valuable to us still yet. Show them respect. Leviticus 19:3 says, Ye shall fear every man his mother and his father. Hey, that's good. And then number 2, we ought to express gratitude to them. Tell our parents and grandparents often that we love them. Because as they live in those golden years, there are fewer friends for them to tell them that. And they're watching their friends pass off the scene, and they need somebody, because the number of people who love them are getting smaller. How much more do children need to tell their parents they love them and they respect them and they care for them as they get older? Heed their counsel. Number 3, heed their counsel. That's how we honor them, is to listen to them. Proverbs 1, verse 8 and 9. My son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother, for they shall be an ornament of grace unto thy head, and chains about thy neck. Now, it's not talking about chains of slavery. It's talking about chains of ornaments or decorations. And older people, they've got a lot that we can learn from, because they've been further down the road than we have. Are you listening? Listen to this. Suppose if my dad was still living, and he and Mom being older, suppose they had gone on a trip to California, and they've gone across I-40, and I've never been that way before. And they're on the trip, and they've already gotten to California, and I'm traveling in a car a few days behind them. And as I go across I-40, they call me up on my cell phone and say, "Hey, son, when you get to Santa Rosa, New Mexico, Route 66 turns off and goes to the right there, and there's some wonderful old restaurants down through there and some antique stores. It's nostalgic. You'll really like that. Turn off and look at that." And then when you get to Albuquerque, stop, after you get through on the west side, stop up on top of the mountain, pull off. There's a rest area up there, and pull off and look back where you just came from, down on Albuquerque, and the site up there, it looks like you're looking out of an airplane, looking down on all the lights of the city. It's beautiful to look at. And when you get to what's the town after Needles? Barstow. When you get to Barstow, California, we found a wonderful hotel there. The prices are good, and it's really clean, and it's really nice, and they've got a good breakfast. It's a great place to stay. We stayed there, and it's a good place to stay. Nice place, nice people there that'll take care of you. Now, if they give me all those instructions, is that me admitting that I'm dumber than they are? They've just been further down the road, haven't they? I shouldn't be ashamed to let them give me instructions, because they've been down the road to a place I haven't been. And they can tell me what's down the road. And young people, let me tell you something. Young people, you can seek advice from your parents, and even when they're elderly, they can tell you some things that they have seen down the road that you haven't experienced yet, and they're not beyond their years. They're not beyond having some knowledge that will help you and some wisdom that will be valuable to you. Love them and appreciate them, and then live nobly. Live nobly. There's nothing that does a mother's heart and a father's heart more good than to see their children living right, good citizens, loving the Lord. You know I'm not the best preacher in the world, and I know I'll never pastor a church of thousands, but my mother thinks I'm the greatest preacher in the world. She thinks I'm the greatest preacher in the world. And she thinks if it weren't for me, there'd be millions of people going to hell. She thinks I've saved thousands and millions, maybe. Not literally, but she thinks I'm great. You know why? Because I used to be a drunk, and she used to kneel by her bed and pray for her little wayward boy that's out running wild and fooling with drugs and drinking liquor and acting like a fool. And she prayed and prayed until God saved that wayward child. And then he turned out to be a preacher. And to her, friend, that's the greatest thing in the world. And the greatest gift that I've been able to give her is not because I'm a perfect guy, not because I am the best preacher in the world, but because now I live for Jesus instead of living a life of ungodliness. Young people, one of the greatest things you can do for your parents is to live a life for the Lord, And that will be a great reward to your parents. And then show them love. Show them love. Show your parents love. Their very blood, your parents' blood, flows through your veins. And you need to show them that you love them. Call. Write. Send a card. There's an old saying, dead noses smell no roses. You better be letting them have their flowers while they're living. I'm not against flowers at funeral. I think it's great. And it's sad to go to a funeral where there's not some flowers and some people gathered to say goodbye to the departed one. But I'll tell you, the most valuable flowers are not the ones at the funeral. They're the ones that you give now. And when I say flowers, it's not just a bouquet of flowers, but it's the other nice things that you do to show your love and respect for your parents. God help us to be children that honor our parents. Let's pray together. Father, I pray that you'd bless us. Lord, I pray